Well, good Thursday evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome into the Fighting Taters show. He's Ryan Luke. My name is Lucas Gephardt. Tonight, we got some early signing day stuff to talk about. Boise State, I think, getting set to play what is probably maybe the biggest game in program history, or at least at Albertson Stadium. It's essentially a college football playoff playing game Friday night against UNLV. So, um, we'll get into that, but first we'll tell you a little bit about the show, kind of what we have going on. I think most of you, this is episode what, 13, 14 now? This is we're racking them up now.
It's up there. Yeah, we're starting to put together a little history.
Yeah, right. But we essentially talk about all things Idaho athletes and their achievements after they leave high school is kind of the gist of this show. And with how good Boise State's been and Ashton Genty and his Heisman run, we've been talking a lot about that as well. You can find any of our previous episodes on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also listen to them on IdahoSports.com as well. We are live tonight on the IdahoSports.com Facebook page, YouTube channel, and X accounts. So glad to have you join us here tonight. And if you would like to leave a comment as well, you are welcome to do that. We can pop those up on the screen as we get them and discuss them as we go along here tonight. So, Ryan, let's go ahead and get into this thing. Big one tomorrow night over at Albertson Stadium. Any concerns, I guess, first of all, you're playing a team in UNLV, which they ended up beating UNLV at UNLV earlier in the year. It's the old cliche, always tough to beat a team twice, right? So here they are, second matchup. Boise State is a 4-point favorite. The over-under 57.5 points. So Vegas expecting this game to be just shy of the 30s, high 20s, low 30s is what they're thinking. Probably plays into just what we saw last time down in Las Vegas. And here's another benefit that Boise State has as well. Ashton Genty is not competing against Travis Hunter tomorrow night. And anyone who's a Heisman voter should probably be watching tomorrow night, and maybe they can swing some votes over to him.
Yeah, talking to people in and around the program, fans, some of the other media out there. To your point, you made a great comment. You said this could be the biggest game in program history. I would argue a Fiesta Bowl a few years ago was probably a little bit bigger. That said, the biggest game at Albertson Stadium by far. I mean, there hasn't been a bigger one. To your point again, this is the playoff game to get into the playoffs. With Tulane losing, Army's not going to catch him. There's nobody out there behind him. Winning, you're in. And not only winning, you're in. Winning, you're probably, although I do have a little bit of argument on this. Realistically, if Arizona State wins, okay, so Arizona State wins the Big 12, that's one you worry about. Or even Clemson, SMU. I think if SMU beats Clemson, I do think that's enough that maybe pushes them past Boise State due to quality of wins, et cetera, et cetera. It just kind of depends because SMU is close enough in the rankings to where they're going to play a higher ranked team, and it may push them over the edge. My gut feeling is the playoff selection committee is probably going to favor SMU if SMU wins. I think Clemson wins that game, and then you have a whole mashup. The flip side is we talk about Arizona State, and again, not to go too deep into this, we're going to preview the game, but not to go too deep into this, Arizona State realistically beating Iowa State, if that comes to that, is another quality win. Now, Arizona State's has 3 wins over ranked opponents this year, and to turn around and do it a fourth time versus Boise State hasn't won any, you can make the argument that Arizona State deserves to be in there. So whatever happens, hey, Boise State is where they are right now. You can only play the game in front of you, so let's talk about that game.
Yeah.
To your point, UNLV, it is tough to beat them twice. Boise State has all kinds of issues in the defensive backfield. They're getting scorched. They're getting burned, chunk plays. Talking to some of these people again, they said point to San Jose State where their quarterback stood there and just threw darts and the receivers caught him and there was no stopping him and eventually had to beat him into submission with Ashton Genty in that run game and kind of neutralize him that way. But if it's me and I'm looking at it, UNLV poses all kinds of problems, great athletes up and down the field. I would be a little worried if I'm a Boise State fan. I'd be a lot worried if I'm a Boise State fan right now.
I'm with you. It's like I said, it's tough to beat a team twice. I think UNLV I know they're playing with a backup quarterback, but I thought he looked pretty good the last time they played. It just feels like, and you and I kind of texted about this. I know they looked good against Oregon State, but we talked about they kind of not really close calls, but weren't really playing their best football late October, early November, right? Like I said, looked pretty good against Oregon State, but I don't know. It just feels like things are sort of trending towards maybe a loss. I don't know. It just that's kind of the way that it feels. That's why I text you. I said it feels like it's trending to a loss, but I don't
Well,
know. I do think that Ashton Genty has been the saving grace, and when they need a play, he gets the ball and he's been able to make the play. The concerns is how many times in a row can he carry the ball 30, 35 times?
yeah, and so you worry about the wear and tear that goes on a guy like that, and specifically a physical runner who creates his yardage after contact. Now, granted, he'll get into space, but a lot of those jump cuts and bouncing off of tackles, not getting thrown down, he does take a lot of contact, a lot. Um, Early on, he had way less contact. Later on, when teams started stacking the box, obviously he took more on. So, there's a little bit of saving there. But just looking at this, he has 312 attempts this season. I mean, he's rushed for almost 2,300 yards, 2,228 yards, and 28 touchdowns. So obviously incredibly productive. But the next closest person is a quarterback, and that's Madsen. Okay. Madsen has 47 carries, which shows me if there's a run game, it's Ashton Genty. It's not a team game. It's not a team running game. It's Ashton Genty. I think the way that it looks to me is Boise State's in neutral and other teams are getting better. I'm not saying Boise State's gotten worse. I'm not. Because actually, Madsen, his completion percentage has been on the rise for the last few games. Heck, he's thrown for 2,500 very, very quiet yards this season. Very quiet yards. But he's done it. And it just feels like Boise State's kind of stuck in neutral. They can't get a lot of production out of, the receiving course. Been okay, hasn't been great. But then you turn around and you look at UNLV. UNLV's gotten better. They started off good, but they've gotten better and they played with a head of steam. Colorado State kind of faded towards the end. Not a ton in the Mountain West, to be honest with you.
They should have lost to Utah State.
Yeah, they really should have. They really, really should have. Yeah, you're right. So, again, stuck in neutral versus a team accelerating.
Yeah, totally. And I think I think this is going to be a real tight game. I think it's going to be a pretty similar script to what we saw. What was that, back in October when it was down in Las Vegas? I think the fact that this game is in Boise will matter. Boise State is really hard to beat when the lights are on. Yeah. When the lights are on and they're on the blue turf, they're a really tough team to beat. That's one of the toughest places to play in the country. And I think that's going to matter. And when push comes to shove, I think Boise State will be able to make the plays when they need to make the plays because they've done that throughout the year. It hasn't always been, the San Jose State game, right? Tough start, right? Wyoming game, again, a little bit of a tough start up there in Laramie. So I think emotions are going to be running high. I think this team knows it's one of the most important games in program history. I think you're going to get a better version of Boise State than we've seen the last few weeks. I also think you get that out of UNLV. Remember, UNLV is ranked 20th in the country right now in the latest CFP rankings, which is kind of why, they're the two highest ranked group of 5 teams. This is essentially the group of 5 championship, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of why we're saying, hey, winner's probably in. To tie it all back to the seeding, I think if Boise State wins, I think they get a first-round bye. And if Clemson wins, I think they could slide up to the 3 seed. However, and that's only because UNLV is ranked as high as they are. But if Boise State loses, I think they're out. UNLV is probably going to – I know they're ranked 10th, right? So Boise State ranked 10th in the rankings, but a loss there, you probably slide back just enough to be out. And then you now have to get in as an at-large bid. And I just don't see this committee taking 2 Mountain West teams. I just don't think it happens.
Yeah, talking around, the question is, would you rather have – let's make it up at this point. Ole Miss, right? Would you take Ole Miss over Boise State? Yeah. And even though Ole Miss is not going to get in, Indiana, Ohio State, obviously Ohio State's still in. Alabama, there's a great one for you, right? A 3-loss Alabama over a 2-loss Boise State team. What would you take? Or realistically, who would have a better chance of progressing in the playoffs and media coverage? So You're right. To your point, I think if you're Alabama, you're hoping and praying that Boise State lose. Well, it doesn't really matter because that group of 5 teams is going
Well,
to be
Mountain
in.
West is going to get one spot. So whoever
Yeah,
wins that game, right?
yeah,
Everyone just kind of slides up in seeding. It's just as the Mountain West team, the 12 seed. In that case, it'd probably be UNLV. But if Boise State wins this game and the cards fall the right way on Saturday, they might slide all the way up to the 3 seed, which if you look at the bracket, you want to be at the bottom of that bracket
yeah.
because that 5 seed is going to be whoever doesn't win the Big Ten championship probably. So, which, could be Oregon, could be,
Penn State.
yeah, Penn State. Yeah, could be Oregon, could be Penn State. So the loser of that game is probably going to get that 5 seed. So 3 seed probably not a bad place to be. I'd
Yeah,
rather
3
be
seeds
3 than 4. So
I just don't see it. I mean, there's going to be some uproar, let's put it that way, from some of these other schools of how can you take, Boise State, who hasn't beaten anybody other than UNLV,
yeah,
but who hasn't beaten anybody, over a team who's, Arizona State, Iowa State, who I don't think Iowa State's that great, but they are what they are. Talk about a Clemson, somebody like that sliding in above them. SMU, right? SMU, their best win will be Clemson if that's the case. So again,
yeah,
there's a lot of pieces that fall there, but if you're talking strictly about the game and not what it matters and not what the selection is going to be, because you win and you're in, that's all there is to it. But if we're talking strictly about this game, they should focus on that because there's a lot that they need to take care of on Saturday.
yeah. And just in case you missed the CFP rankings, Boise State ranked at 10th, Miami at 12th. Miami does not play. They did not qualify for the ACC championship. A lot of experts think Miami's probably out. And then you have Alabama at 11 that we said 9-3, Ole Miss at 13 at 9-3, South Carolina at 14 at 9-3, Arizona State at 15, who, like we said, is going to play for the Big 12 championship, playing Iowa State, who is ranked 16th, and Clemson back at 17th will play SMU, who is ranked 8th for the ACC championship. So, going to be a fun weekend. This tournament's created a lot of talking points up to this point. So,
and you know what? It's flawed. It's never going to be perfect. Remember the whole argument? Oh my gosh, you can't just have 4. How could you do that? Well, if I'm being honest, I think 4 teams, only realistically 4 teams have a shot to win this thing. Maybe 5, right? Because once you start getting out into the outer edges, it just makes for more intrigue and more money. So to a certain degree, the BCS, I think, was probably the right structure. But at the same time, it's a flawed system and it's never going to be perfect. I mean, you can't play 18 games in a season. You just can't play it, and all there is to it. You just can't do it, but it's fun. Certainly going to be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a lot of fun. It's definitely been the most fun I've had watching college football this year. By the way, Idaho also has a playoff game this weekend as well. They play Lehigh in the FCS playoffs. That game is at the Kibbe Dome. It's a 6:00 start up north. Idaho has really kind of leaned its way on the defense this year. Not a bad thing to have when you're playing playoff football, especially at home. But team to beat this year in FCS is Montana State.
Oof.
So,
yeah. Well, you and I, it was funny. You and I were texting back and forth, and I sent you, and the highest attendance, average game attendance, in all of FCS. And I wish I had it. I'd pull it up for you. We could screen share it with you, which is actually kind of fun. But number 1 and number 2, number 1 was Montana, right? Number 1, and Montana was 28,000, and Montana State was 25,000, and then the rest, it wasn't even close. I mean, it was not even within earshot. And you could just see they took football. That is it, man. Montana State football is just unbelievable. I mean, that is what they have. They're no professional teams. There's nothing to fall back on, right? I mean, Idaho, you could make the same argument. And Boise State, quite frankly, is that for the state of Idaho, for a lot of the state of Idaho. But Montana football, there's definitely hometown feel. And between Montana played for the national championship last year, right?
Yeah.
Like Montana was in the game under, what's his name? Hauk, the coach, the second time around. They've won one. They've been in multiple championships, and now Montana State right there as well, played for a national championship. Great stuff going on with our neighbors to the east.
Yeah. Looking at it right now that you sent me, Montana State was ranked 2nd, average attendance 25,845. The percentage on how that fills their stadium, 102%.
Oh man, love it.
Montana State even better. They're 3rd. They average 21,000 fans a game. Their average percentage on how that fills their stadium, 123%.
Standing room only, baby. Standing
Yeah,
room only.
right. The only teams above them in the FCS is do you remember who it is?
Yeah, it's Jackson State,
Yep.
Jacksonville, right? Or Jackson
Yeah,
State.
Jackson State, which
Yeah.
averages 27,000 fans for each one of their games, but they only fill 63% of the stadium. So
Well, because they're
best
playing.
atmospheres in the FCS, Montana and Montana State.
Yeah, so Jackson State's playing in a stadium. Crap. I can't remember, but it's a professional stadium that they use for various venues, and then Jackson State uses it as their home field. I find it.
Yeah, it's a pretty big stadium. So fun times over there in the FCS. All right, let's transition now to early signing day. Happened just a few days ago. So I have a graphic here, and you're going to pull up the 24/7 Sports website. We'll talk about it in real time. But while you get that up, we'll just show you this. Here are some of the top Idaho uh, recruits and where they're going. So at the top here, you have a couple offensive linemen and Dallin Grimes out of Middleton going to Boise State. Sione Perkins, a tackle out of Eagle, going to Iowa State. Then you have a couple Mountain West commits out of Rocky and Isaiah Reed going to Nevada. Caden Kimball-Turner going to Wyoming. And then after that, you have a slew of FCS commits. Hayden Thompson, a safety out of Rocky, going to Montana State. Idaho checking in here with Shepard Fish, who's a good edge rusher out of Capital. Mason Cron, a good athlete out of Skyview. And Nate Williams, another good athlete out of Eagle. They're all going to Idaho. Nicholas Maloff, an inside linebacker out of Meridian, also committing to Montana State, who we just talked about. Parker Graham, who's a good athlete out of Rigby, plays the defensive back and wide receiver position for Rigby. He's committed to Idaho State. And Gage Larson, an edge rusher out of Rigby and Eastern Washington commit. So those are some of the top recruits around the state. So on that list, who stands out? Who's going to the right spot? Or all of them going to the right spot? What stands out to you on this list?
Well, flip me over. Let me share my screen. I'm going to show. I have these guys pulled up. Yeah, here we go. Real time. So Dallin Grimes is kind of the star of this, and I did a couple of games. I've done a few games over the years with Grimes, and he's the big nasty up front. He moves well. He actually, I think he caught a touchdown pass in one of the games that I did.
Yeah.
But so stay local with Boise State. And honestly, this is the only kid right here, and you're going to see in a minute. Dallin Grimes was the only kid from Idaho that Boise State recruited. So pros and cons, right? Pro, you really want to build because you got to have that community in that pipeline. If you go to some of the other local areas, in Utah, University of Utah and BYU recruit heavily out of the state of Utah. They get a lot of those. Granted, the level of high school football in the state of Utah is amazing. But Sione Perkins, big kid, 6'9", 260, also a basketball player, signing at Iowa State. That's the only Power 5 conference signee versus everybody else. And then you can make the argument the Pac-12 is going to be something at some point. But Caden Kimball-Turner, I think that's a good fit. He has an opportunity to go in and contribute. I think he'll probably be on the defensive side of the ball, if I'm not mistaken. Isaiah Reed, great smooth athlete. They really think highly of him. This is what you look at right here, this score, this composite. He has an 85, but I think that 85 is an athlete. He does move well. He's a big kid. He's 6'2", and he's all of 6'2". I think he moves up and he plays linebacker at Nevada. You may also see him on the offensive side of the ball, but I do think his position is going to be defensive. And then moving down along the board, I think Shepard Fish, you mentioned that one before. Idaho does a really good job of recruiting in the Treasure Valley, and they're keeping that pipeline alive. So you're seeing more and more of these kids from the Valley, and this started probably 3 or 4 years ago. And when Meridian started making a run, a lot of those kids made those runs. So you can see that. Nate Williams, edge rusher, great athlete as well. Nicholas Maloff, this was a fun one. He was bigger. He's actually slimmed down. He was bigger. He was up around 340 and then really kicked it in gear and became just a dominant force interior offensive lineman. And I called him as a sophomore. I called my friends at 24/7. I was like, dude, you got to look at this kid, man. He's a beast inside. So I think Montana State's a great place for Maloff. He'll go there. He can work into a really good position. Some of the ones that do surprise me that have not signed, Kai Wheeler out of Coeur d'Alene, plays basketball as well, but a highly productive receiver with Caden Caden Simmons is the quarterback there. I mean, caught all kinds of touchdown passes,
Yeah.
was into the semifinals actually last year, played for the state championship in 5A. Zeke Martinez is an interesting one. He early on, he's been starting since he was a freshman, right? As a freshman, he got playing time because brother got injured. And since then, he took him to the state championship, their undefeated season, lost to Rigby. But since then, it's been a little bit quieter on the recruiting front. Got an offer from Memphis, University of Memphis early on, and then since then been some NAIA schools. Didn't sign anything today. Parker Graham, I just did his game versus for the state championship versus Eagle, great athlete, and then so forth and so on. Gage Larson, Jack Giannini, high energy guy. You'll see him ranting and raving on the sidelines. Idaho picks up a really, we'll call him an energetic defender. He's able to move well and get around the ball. But what I do see that is kind of disturbing is one signee for Idaho State.
Yeah, that's
and
a little
you've got to
concerning.
keep that pipeline alive. You just have to.
Yeah, especially when you see Idaho getting what they have 4, 5,
4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
Yeah, especially
4.
when you
Yep.
see, especially in the Treasure Valley, right? And you got some pretty good kids. I mean, these are 3-star kids with Fish and Cron, and it's not just one position, right? You have an edge rusher, you have an athlete, So I'm with you. That was a little concerning for Idaho State when I saw that. And we can start with them since we're talking about them. Here is who they signed yesterday as well. So you do have a couple Idaho kids. You see one there out of Rexburg, and Rex Solis is an offensive lineman. You have another one down there here, Parker Graham, who's out of Rigby, is going to play safety for him. And that's it.
Well, there's one more, and it's McKay Dougal, the defense lineman from Thunder Ridge. I didn't even know he signed. To be honest with you, he wasn't even on my radar. So when he signed that, it's, good for them.
Yeah. Now, you do have another signing day in February, right? February 5th, when the NLI, not to be confused with NIL, right? And college football these days. So there is another signing day period that teams can add to this. So maybe ISU can go in and grab some of those guys that we mentioned who haven't signed. But you look at this list for Idaho State. And they're in Utah, right? They're in Arizona was one that kind of popped out to me.
Yeah.
California is another one. They've always had a strong recruiting base in California. I think they've really improved in Utah. They didn't used to be quite as active in Utah as they are now. Then you see one down there at the bottom, the lone non-regional one out of Florida at the bottom there in a running back.
So. Andre Skelton, yeah. And I wish I knew something about him. I typically know pretty much about a lot of these guys, and I don't know anything about them, but that's what you're going to get. And if you're Coach Hawkins, you have to find some of these diamonds in the rough, or you have to find some of the picked over kids. I do like the idea. Look, Utah's right down the road. It's I-15 South. You're right there, and you can pick up some of these kids. And the level of high school football being played in
for high school too.
It's great.
Yeah.
And so I was looking at some of these kids. I do know Mama played defensive line at Lehigh. Lehigh won the state championship last year. This year competed, I think, got all the way to the semifinals. This kid, Wyatt Orton, big kid out of Kanab. I actually just drove through Kanab probably a month and a half ago. Another Lehigh kid, but this one from Skyridge High School, which is a perennial powerhouse in Utah. Ryder Holt, he's a big physical kid. He moves around, flies around the ball really well. So I do like the idea of recruiting out of Utah. I think it makes a lot of sense. And, they picked up where they could. They got a Madison kid. That's an Eastern Idaho kid. But, and then they got the Rigby kid, Parker Graham. But outside of that, kind of feel one more with the McDougal or Dougal. But I feel like you got to recruit Idaho. I just do. If you want the fan base to expand here, and a couple years ago, Idaho State was really trying to grow the fan base in the Treasure Valley. They tried to do some. And I don't even know what it is. You probably know. You graduated from there, but isn't there a watch bar from somewhere to watch the games in the Treasure Valley?
That's a good question. I know where Idaho's is.
Well, yeah,
that's at Perea. They got the game on pretty much every week there. I should know that, and I don't.
Well, my point is
they have done quite a few more alumni type of
Right.
events. Cody Hawkins has come over here to like meet with some of the boosters and stuff that live over here. So they've done like that kind of thing. But so was Idaho. Idaho had their spring game here 3 years ago, 2 years
Yeah.
ago, maybe.
Yeah.
Held it at Eagle High School. Made a big event out of it, and that's important for them.
Huge.
I know during the Big Sky tournament, their alumni or their athletic boosters, they rent out a suite during the Big Sky tournament when it's in Boise, and they invite a bunch of boosters and all kinds of people that live in the Treasure Valley to that. And I think that turns out a bunch of money for them out of it, and can't hurt to rub elbows with some of the alumni that are in this valley. And so they do a lot more things like that than Idaho State does. But looking at how Idaho, who you see on your screen now, kind of compares to Idaho State, clearly Idaho won the state this round. I mean, Idaho recruited by far the most kids from Idaho in this recruiting class, and maybe Boise State only really went after one in Grimes. But you look at kids like a Shepherd Fish. Like, I can't imagine Idaho State wasn't in on a kid like him,
Yeah.
and they end up choosing Idaho, right?
Yeah, I mean, you look. Plus, winning helps. I think Idaho State's turning the corner. We talk about that multiple times, but winning helps. And if you get a chance, think about it this way too. And I hate to say this because it's really good football, and I hope it continues to be good football. But we have builder programs, and then we have landing programs. Builder programs build players to get NIL. Now you've got me confused. NIL. There it
Yeah,
is. NIL deals. And unless there's some sort of loyalty, because the NIL money at Idaho is not Alabama NIL money or Oregon NIL money. But the idea is that you can do that. Well, what better chance to do that if you have bigger stage, playing bigger games, winning more ball games? You'll probably choose that.
yeah,
Idaho State can get there, absolutely. And like we talked about, and we can just jump real quick to these to Dallin Grimes again. Boise State probably only pursued him, and quite frankly, that was the only one from the state of Idaho that they had circled that stood out to them. Sione Perkins, if you click on him, I don't even know if he got an offer from. Well, yeah, see, no offer. He didn't even get an offer from
yeah.
Boise State.
That's interesting. Yeah, and look at the list too. So Iowa State. I mean, that to me is a no brainer. If you're him,
Yeah,
looking
take
at the
it.
schools
Go
that
to
offered
Ames,
you, right?
right? Play big time football. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but
Well,
it'll be
speaking
cool
of
to
Boise
see
State,
him.
let's jump over to Boise State.
Yeah, yeah. Boise State,
Yeah,
kind of interesting thing, and you kind of saw this to the same extent with Idaho. Boise State, we talked off air about this. Secondary struggled this year for Boise State. So what do you see at the top of this list?
yeah,
A corner,
yep.
and a guy that they're pretty excited
Yeah,
about
and
too.
in '88, right? Yeah, they're really excited about
Yeah,
Crutchfield. Did a lot of good things. Rancho Cucamonga, very athletic, fluid, 5'11", so not dominant height, but he has dominant athleticism. I believe he's a track guy too, if I'm not mistaken. But 88, so I don't give the stars or the rankings, but you get to a 90 and you're a 4-star. So he is 2 points away from being a 4-star. Jaden Williams, edge rusher, Mission Viejo, the guy right below him. Again, a couple of California kids. But this has been Boise State's MO. Let's go to California, right? Let's get these kids who are second or third picks for some of the bigger schools. USC, historically, UCLA was in there. You see some of quite frankly, Texas used to recruit California a little bit stronger as well. So now Boise State steps up and starts picking up these kids, the Crutchfield, the Williams. And it makes sense, right? Go to a big program, biggish program that's winning on a good scale, has national recognition, and Boise State's leveraged their national notoriety really well, especially landing Taj Crutchfield in this
yeah,
round.
yeah. I mean, it's looking at his bio that Boise State put out here. Top 100 recruit in California, which California is a big state. There's a lot of guys that come out of California, right? So um, that's an accomplishment in and itself, right? Boise State's not getting 5-star recruits. They almost got one last recruiting class, I guess. But you look at a guy like this, and is this a guy that maybe could step in and get some early playing time? I think it might be. I mean, this is the prize of the class so far.
Yeah. Well, look at the offers, right? BYU, Arizona State, Arizona, Big 12 offers. And as we've seen this season, Big 12 football has been good. You know, people have talked a lot about, oh, well, it's garbage. What's his name? Eric Corrales was saying, oh, it's just garbage. Well, I mean, they beat each other up, right? Because they do play good football. SEC's done the same thing as well. But, oh, here you go, Santa. How you doing? But some of these good offers,
Yeah.
and hats off to Boise State for landing Crutchfield. And for that matter, Jaden Williams, another one, an 88 composite as well. You know, offers from San Diego State, Sac State. I would choose Boise State too, although the weather here in San Diego State, I don't know how they don't land
better.
5 stars left and right, man. I'm telling you.
Don't bring him in on the visit when it's an inversion like we have right now, right?
Yeah, it could be pretty rough. But all in all, they had a pretty good signing class. A lot of 3-stars as you go down the list here, a bunch of 87s and 88s, 86. I actually saw Bull. I was watching film of Bull, and you know, he's 6'4", 255. He's a little lean too. He looks like he could probably put another 15, 20 pounds on, but a very fluid athlete. I saw him do a swim move, come in for he had a sack on the quarterback, and so I see him as maybe that edge rusher that they're looking for. Again, Dallin Grimes down here. Deshaun Toilolo out of Skyridge, again, a powerhouse. He's an explosive athlete. They made it, I think they were all the way to the semifinals as well in 6A. Very explosive athlete.
Yeah. So it just goes to kind of show, too, that both Boise State and Idaho really focusing on the defensive side of the ball. Idaho, very heavy recruiting class defensively. Boise State trying to plug some holes in on its secondary, which has been, you know, the problem. If there is a problem on a team that's been as good as they have been this year, that's probably the one that is getting talked about the most, and it's probably the one that has exposed them the most. So you see these teams trying to not only plug those holes, but find players that can come in and step in and play next year. Now, I don't know if you saw this, but Boise State and their head coach, Spencer Danielson, said in a press conference a few days ago that already some of their guys he said they were illegally getting recruited to the transfer portal, basically.
Tampering.
Yeah. So essentially tampering, right? So they could lose a ton of guys, you know, this off season. So we'll see how they kind of adjust to that, and if they're able to keep some of those guys. Didn't mention any of the guys that are, obviously, but said he was going to talk to those players on Sunday and try to keep them around, and it worked out for them last year. They were able to keep Genty out of the portal as well. But it's just interesting how quickly college football can change. And a school like Boise State, they have a great year. Defensive front, I mean, they're one of the top schools in the country in sacks this year. As bad as the secondary's been, they've been pretty good up front. So you would imagine some of those players might be who Spencer Danielson was talking about. So it's just kind of interesting. You have this early signing day, and then you have this transfer portal window, and then you have another signing day later in February. So a hole that you think might be a hole, you could fill in the transfer portal. Maybe they get a corner in the transfer portal, right?
Well,
and then something that you thought you had sewn up for the next couple years, you could lose that in the portal too. So I can't imagine how hard it is to be a college coach.
Oh, man. Well, hey, Nick Saban stepped down because of it. Just want to point out a couple of things, and we can jump out of this. Daniil Stark, I guess Stark is how you say his name. Berlin, Germany. How cool is that, right?
Yeah.
Coming out of Berlin, Adler, Germany. Transfer portal guys, Samuel Brooks, safety, Jalen Webb, Kilgore Junior College, Kilgore, Texas. Great football there. A safety that's coming in. So, you know, they're looking to plug some holes in the defensive backfield. I think they're seeing that. Also, Arthur Debochi, check it out, NFL Academy London. And, of course, you can't have a punter or a kicker these days. He's going to be a punter if they're not from Australia, right? From the Kicking Your Cat Pro Kick Australia. Everybody has them. Everybody has them.
Yeah. So there you have it. And one last look at it here are some of your early signing day commits as we wrap up here on the Fighting Tater show. And as we kind of started with this, anyone that kind of stands out to you, we kind of talked through them a little bit, especially down in these like FCS categories here.
Yeah.
Anyone really kind of stand out to you there?
So I really love Mason Cron as an athlete. I really do. And I've seen him play a couple of times. I've called a couple of his games, and he really just stood out from a physical perspective. He's all of 6'2", and he has a big frame, but he moves really well. And where he ends up, and they're saying he's going to be a defensive lineman in Idaho, I could see him being kind of that hybrid edge linebacker when he goes to Idaho. But he stands out to me. I think that's a great fit for him. He has a chance to grow in under great tutelage and great coaching at Idaho. And we see what Coach Eck has done with a lot of those players. Like you said, they've built themselves on defense. And I think Cron has a chance to get in and really become an integral part of that defense. And so I really like Mason Cron, Skyview, heading to University of Idaho.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, so there's your last look there at the early signing day classes across Idaho. Again, here is who Idaho got locally: Shepard Fish, Mason Cron, Nate Williams, Flaherty, and Gianni out of Eagle. And then Idaho State, a couple local kids as well, with Solace, Graham, and McKay Dougal. McKay Dougal. There you go. Out of Thunder Ridge. So, well, we talked about it at the top. Just want to get your quick prediction for tomorrow night. Boise State's a 4-point favorite. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually think it's going to be, we're looking 28, probably 24, something like that. I'm going Boise State.
28.
Close. Boise State close. Yep.
Yeah. I like Boise State 31-24.
Okay.
Again, close game. So. We're the Fighting Taters. He's Ryan Luke. My name is Lucas Gephardt. Thanks for watching here tonight. Don't forget to check us out on Spotify and on IdahoSports.com. You can go check out our previous episodes there. We'll see you guys next week.